Hello, everyone. I am excited to have you all on today's call. My name is Linda Nsefo. I am the initiator or the founder of Women in Research, Monitoring, Evaluation, and Learning. So if you're new to this meeting, I'll just give you a little bit of background as to who Women in RML are and what the agenda is for our meeting today. Okay, so Women in RML, we are basically an online community. We are focused on accelerating the careers of women in the research, monitoring, evaluation, and learning sector. So since the beginning of this year, we've been having monthly calls, monthly meetings with people in the sector, those who are new to the sector, and those who have practiced for a number of years. And what we seek to do on our calls is to sort of expand our knowledge about RML and see how we can improve on what we are currently doing and be abreast with ongoing trends and also help others who are new to the sector as well. Okay, so our basic tagline is mentorship, impact, networks, and transformation. So that's basically what we seek to do on our calls. So today, especially, we have one expert who I will be introducing soon, and she'll be speaking on developing a monitoring and evaluation system for programs. And before that, I would just like to give everyone the opportunity to just say something brief in the chat. Let us know where you're joining us from. You can also let us know how long you've practiced in RML and anything you would want to gain out of today's session. And also I will share my screen so we can engage in a brief activity before we dive in, so as to break the ice a bit. So I just want to have a sense of how everyone is feeling today. So you can just indicate with a number in the chat how you're feeling, how your mood is at the moment, as part of the introductions as well. Just give us a few minutes to think about it, and then we share as we go along. So are you excited? Are you content? Are you overwhelmed? Or maybe just indifferent? Okay, nice to meet you, Samuel. Thank you for connecting, Gabriel. And Gabriel is number 4. Okay. Any more? How are we feeling at the moment? Okay, so if you just joined, we're just engaging in a brief ice-breaking activity. Let us know who you are, where you're joining us from, and how you're feeling at the moment, and anything else you want us to know about you at the moment. Okay. Kandi is number 4 too. Okay. All right. Okay, so I think we can just move on now. So I will just stop sharing this, and then I will move onto the agenda just to give us an idea of what we're expecting today, and then we can carry on. So sharing my screen now. Okay, I hope everyone can see my screen. Okay, so basically this is the format of our call. So we've done welcome, we've done an icebreaker, And then I will introduce our speaker for today, and she'll be speaking on developing your program's monitoring and evaluation system. We'll have a time of Q&A, but please, if along the line, while our speaker is presenting, you have any burning questions or you need some quick clarification on something she said, don't hesitate to ask your question in the chat. I can read it out for you, or you can also raise up your hand and I'll call you so that you can ask the speaker directly. And then there'll be some time of announcements and feedback, and then would have a closing. So basically, this is the structure for our call today. So I'll stop sharing now and then introduce our speaker. Okay, so Kandi Shejavali has extensive multi-sectoral experience in international development, national social policy, and international trade-related fields with a focus on monitoring and evaluation-related functions. Specializing in designing and implementing robust yet readily implementable results-based M&E systems, Kandi relishes opportunities to adapt international best M&E practices and principles to different contexts while remaining guided and informed by relevant local or traditional customs and knowledge. Her assignments have included serving as the M&E director of a $304.5 million USD Millennium Challenge Corporation program and as an M&E consultant to projects funded by entities such as the European Union, MasterCard Foundation, UK Aid, UNICEF, and UNDP. Currently, alongside her consulting work, she also provides advisory and coaching services to support program teams on M&E topics. Whether through her consulting or coaching, Kandi envisions fit-for-purpose M&E frameworks and tools that are practical to apply and that yield quality information to those who need it, when they need it, for strategic programming, accountability, and communications purposes. So, participants today, I'd like us to welcome our speaker, Kandi Shejavali. So, Kandi, please, over to you.
Great, thank you, Linda.
You're welcome.
I'm just going to share my screen. All right. Can everyone see my screen okay?
Yes.
All right.
It's visible. Participants, you can also type to confirm that you can see her screen, please.
Excellent. So I'd like to start off by showing you this map of marine traffic. So I don't know how many of you here have ever seen this map, but it basically shows all the traffic at a certain point in time that is in the various oceans around the world. Right. And as we speak, or as I speak rather, someone who's very dear to me is actually crossing the Atlantic by sailboat. And her ship will be somewhere in the area between the Caribbean and Europe. And if we zoomed in, I imagine that this might be what her sailboat would look like. And for sailboats, in order to get them from their point of departure to their destination, they use navigation systems that might be operated from cockpits that look something like this. And from these cockpits, the navigation system provides critical information at key points in time related to the progress being made by the vessel, the changing conditions in the surrounding environment and the direction the boat is taking, and many other details that serve as the basis on which to make evidence-based decisions for steering the vessel. So, for example, on the basis of the navigation evidence, the captain of a ship might decide to refine the direction of the boat. And an important element of doing that is adjusting the sails of the boat, which we see here. So you might be asking yourselves, what does this story have to do with M&E systems? Actually, quite a bit, because just like sailboat vessels need navigation systems and sails to appropriately maintain or refine or adjust course, so a program or a project needs an M&E system to appropriately maintain or correct course And an M&E system serves as a navigation system because it lets everyone know how things are going and where things are at. So today, as Linda highlighted, we'll be talking about developing, and I'd like to say, or fine-tuning your program's M&E system, because very often we don't get to develop an M&E system from scratch. We usually have some components of it, and it's our job to fine-tune them. The subtitle of this presentation was going to be Essential Steps Towards a Fit-for-Purpose M&E System. But again, related to what I just said, we often don't get a chance to follow a sequence of steps. So I'm just going to focus on essential elements of a fit-for-purpose M&E system that could be applied at any point along the way. So quickly, to some quick preliminaries, just as a reminder, all the information provided in this presentation is copyrighted. So it'd be great that if you do share it, just remember to credit me or RM3 Consulting, which is the company I work and founded. And if you do share on social media, please feel free to tag me. That would be great. All right, and then one more thing. Is there a need to define any of these terms which are in the title of the presentation, title and subtitle, such as program, M&E system, fit for purpose? If anyone could jump in and let us know, or if anyone could just dive in and maybe give us the definitions of these terms. Any brave souls willing to jump in? And maybe these terms are actually perfectly clear, so that would be fine. But one thing I will highlight is that in this presentation, I'm using the word program and project interchangeably. And when a program is the only program, let's say, that's run by an organization, this could also very well apply to an organization. So it's developing and refining M&E systems for programs, projects, or organizations. All right, so we'll move right along. Why it matters to have an M&E system. I think we've adequately covered this when I did the analogy with the sailboat, but would anyone like to dive in? It would be great if this was an interactive session. If anyone would like to dive in and just maybe give us one or two reasons for why we need to have an M&E system in the first place. And I'm not sure if I'm able to see the chat. So Linda, if you see any responses.
I'll keep an eye on it. Okay, anyone wants to volunteer? You can raise your hand and I will call you, or you can also type in the chat and I will read your responses. No answer is out of place, so anything that comes to mind, there's no right or wrong. Just feel free and share your thoughts.
Hi, this is Peter.
Okay. Hi, Peter.
Yes, Peter.
Right. So I think that the rationale behind fine-tuning or developing an M&E system is because the practice of monitoring, the practice of evaluation needs to be guided. Now, because no two projects or no two programs are the same, we need to fine-tune what we have established for an initial intervention or initial project to reflect the needs of the new one. Finally, you realize that as implementation of projects and interventions go on, there are some lessons that emerge. There are some patterns of knowledge that cluster. Now, what do you do with these? If your system didn't capture how to use such patterns or such clusters of information that are, congregating, then you need to do something to your M&E system so that you can capture these issues that are emerging and be able to use them. So in my mind, the process of fine-tuning an M&E system is an ongoing process because the M&E system is a living organism. Thank you, and over.
Great. Thank you, Peter, so much. That was a great response. And you really highlighted an important point, is that once you have an M&E system in place, it doesn't mean it's in place and then it's stuck. And that's it. And that's what the program has to use from start to finish. It's really important that the M&E system remains alive, as Peter said, and that it evolves along with the program, along with changing context, along with the evidence that it produces that may lead the program to adjusting. So that's great. Thank you so much, Peter. That's excellent. All right. So I'm going to cover, as I mentioned, sort of the key elements of a fit-for-purpose M&E system and what I have found in my experience to be the key critical elements. And of course, there may be others, but these are the ones that I think come out to me as being the most important. So they're going to be that the core objectives of the M&E system be established. We're going to cover these one by one in the upcoming slides. That the essential principles of the M&E system be established. That there be a robust theory of change in place. That the key questions that are to be answered with M&E evidence have been identified. That there's a comprehensive plan for measurement, reporting, and use of the evidence that is generated from the M&E system. That M&E is well integrated into the program, and that the M&E system is clearly documented. So we could think of these elements sort of as a series of steps that might look something like this. So, we first get the objectives, the principles, robust theory of change, and so on. But as I hinted earlier, life, we're like living in the real world, and life just almost never happens that way in sequence, especially when it comes to working in the sectors that we work in. So in the real world, the program ship, so if we go back to our metaphor of the ship and an M&E navigation system, the program ship may have already set sail, or it may already be going through some rough waters. It may have almost wrecked, or it may have wrecked, or it may have already arrived at its destination. And all of this could have happened before M&E is even brought in. So to align ourselves with that real world, instead of saying the key steps towards a fit-for-purpose M&E system, the steps could happen in almost any sequence. Some of them don't even happen. Again, we rather talk about key elements of a fit-for-purpose M&E system. So let's quickly run through some of these elements. And yes, was someone trying to say something? No? Okay, I'll keep going. But as Linda said at the top of the presentation, please feel free to jump in for any burning questions on any specific slides, but there will be time at the end for us to have a discussion. So starting with the core elements or the core objectives of an M&E system, when one thinks about objectives in the context of a social program or a project, often we think of the objectives of the program or the project itself. But I think for me, it's been really important and very helpful to come up with objectives for the M&E system. And so some of these key objectives would be to help demonstrate accountability, which should be accountability that goes upwards and downwards. It would be to inform program steering. So that's to help make sure that the decisions are informed by evidence, learning, and so on. And also to support credible communication. So those are some of the sort of the three key ones that come out to me. And of course, additional objectives for program-specific M&E system could be articulated that are very much tailored to the program itself. Then another element of a robust M&E system would be that the principles of the M&E system be agreed. And some of the typical principles that I integrate, and well, maybe before I talk about some of the typical principles, just in terms of why I think this is important, to me, in my experience, establishing principles for the M&E system has just helped provide some clarity and transparency on how the activities of the M&E system are going to be undertaken. And they serve somewhat as a promise to different stakeholders on how those activities will be undertaken and why. So some of the typical principles that I integrate are that there's a robust theory of change at the core of the M&E system, that the M&E system, the M&E activities invite meaningful, broad participation, that there's an alignment and integration of M&E with the nature of the program and its implementation modalities, that there's also an alignment with existing frameworks and operational policies and practices. And here, this goes beyond the program itself. So it could be in the context of the country, for example. And I'll talk about some specific examples, maybe if it comes up in the Q&A. But one that comes to mind that maybe I actually will talk about right now is working on some projects. If you have a data quality assessment framework, for example, often countries' National Statistics Office will have a framework for data quality. And so instead of inventing a new one for the program, especially if the program is supposed to continue following the funded period, it would be good to adopt the National Data Quality Assessment Framework if it's appropriate for the program. So that's just one example. Another principle is that the program be robust, yet relatively straightforward to apply, because it doesn't really help to have a very sort of gold standard M&E system with all the bells and whistles, but if no one is using it or is able to use it, then that's not very effective. And of course, it should provide timely evidence to fulfill the core objectives of M&E, as well as the program-specific M&E objectives, which I mentioned in the previous slide. And then lastly, or maybe not lastly, but next, sort of lastly for this slide, but it really should be thought about from the get-go, the M&E system should be as transformative as appropriate to the context. And we can dive a bit more into that if people would like to talk about that in the Q&A. The next element is that there be a robust theory of change in place or in development, because again, we don't always live in we don't live in an ideal world. And sometimes we don't have a theory of change in place at the outset. And sometimes it may not even be desirable to have one in place at the outset. It may be better to allow one to evolve organically. But for a theory of change to be considered robust, whether it's developed at the outset or during the course of the program, it should be comprehensive, comprehensible, and well-defined. It should be meaningful and supported by all the different stakeholders involved in the program. It should be achievable and plausible. It should be credible, so supported by relevant evidence. And when I say evidence here, I do refer to all kinds of evidence. So it could be from other programs, learnings from other programs. It could be from people's lived experiences. And then it should be testable. And this is adapted from the NCBO know-how. Then a robust or fit-for-purpose M&E system should also have articulated overarching questions that the M&E generated evidence are going to help answer. So these are overarching questions that could be related to learning. It could be questions related to, efficiency, for example. If there's going to be a value for money framework, some of the questions are sort of like how and to what effect have the resources of the program been used. And all of that should be articulated with the help of the measurement and analysis framework. And then based on what will be measured, which again comes from the measurement and analysis framework, there should also be a plan in place for how those things are going to be measured. And so that obviously pertains to data collection and analysis. All of those and the related means of measurement should be well articulated. Monitoring measures themselves often feature indicators. And if those are going to be used, they should be entirely documented. And afterwards, Linda will be sharing a link to some slides and just a guide that's related to this presentation. So you'll be able to click on a template if you'd like to for documenting indicators. And then that plan, it's not just about sort of laying out what that plan is going to be, it's also making sure that there are adequate resources, human, physical, financial, in order to make sure that that plan for measurements is able to be implemented. And there's a lot of other details related to this that we don't have time to go into now. We could probably spend the whole hour just on the various parts of this element, but this gives you sort of a brief overview. Then the element of M&E being well integrated into the rest of the program. So I'm sure you've all had this experience and had experience with this, is where sometimes you have a program and the M&E tools and templates are separate from the program related tools and templates. And sometimes that's necessary. Sometimes that's done because there just is no other way. But very often they could be more closely integrated. So they should be integrated to the extent possible, not just in the tools and templates, but in the program cycle itself, of course. So there are specific M&E activities that should be happening at different points in the program cycle. And we're going to go into a little bit into more detail about the program cycle in the next slide. They should be integrated into the program's processes and procedures, as well as tools. So data collection tools, let's say the M&E system needs to gather information about the gender of different program participants. Then if there's an intake form that the program is using, then rather than creating a separate form for M&E data, then the relevant elements could just be added to that intake form, for example. And of course, the M&E system should be also aligned with the context of the program itself, just like the program needs to be aligned with its context. And so again, just overall, there should be as much alignment as is feasible and appropriate with the program's approach, as well as with the program's implementation modalities and its tools. And just to go into a little bit more detail on the program cycle. So each program or project has its unique cycle, of course, but I think that most can relate to the following general stages. So there's a design stage or phase, or I actually prefer to call it mode. I won't get into why right now, but that's the initial sort of definition and planning of the program of the project. Then there's the implementation phase or mode or stage, which is when the planned activities are being carried out. There's the reporting stage, just communicating some of the spending or progress achievement of the programs. There should ideally be a review and reflection stage where everyone, all the relevant stakeholders, pause and consider the progress to date, distill the lessons that might be coming out of the capturing of the lessons that takes place as part of the M&E systems activities. And then that information and that evidence, those lessons are then used in order to guide adaptation of the program. And Peter mentioned this when he was talking about sort of why we have an M&E system in the first place. These are sort of the main points at which they are applied in order to inform follow-on planning and implementation. All right. And then, as I mentioned earlier, each program will have its unique stages, but it will also have its own rhythm. So different programs are, for example, quarterly, it could be biannually, it could be annually, and so on. The M&E system should be aligned with that. And then as the last element of that I think is really important to highlight for a fit for purpose M&E system is then clearly documenting the M&E system. And this really just speaks to actually writing down, where everyone sort of has access to it, all the elements that I've touched on up until here. So sort of what the objectives of the M&E system are, the tools that are going to be used, the principles of the M&E system, and so on. And I generally recommend using two separate documents for this. So there'd be the M&E plan, which would be much more conceptual. It would talk about the objectives of the M&E system, touch on the principles, talk about the different broad questions that the M&E system generated evidence is going to answer. And then you have the M&E manual, which would be much more practical in nature. And so what you could have in the M&E manual would be like the specific tools, worksheets, sort of more of the operational elements of the M&E system. And the reason I typically, put these in two different documents is that the manual, even though the M&E system as a whole is the living system, the manual tends to change more regularly. So, there'll be a tool that's used that will maybe be replaced by another one, or there's a new event, and then you come up with a new tool. So rather than changing the M&E plan each time, it's easy to just like change one of the sheets in the M&E manual and then include that with the rest of the manual rather than redoing the whole thing. All right, and taken together, as I mentioned, both the M&E plan and the M&E manual will just sort of comprehensively lay out what will be measured, how to be measured, with what means it will be measured, all of this to maximize, ultimately, the project's potential to create positive social impact. So just as a quick recap, the key elements, or what I think are the key elements of a fit-for-purpose M&E system: the core objectives having been established, essential principles being agreed upon, a robust theory of change in place or in development, key overarching questions identified, a comprehensive plan for measurement, reporting, and use, M&E activities well integrated into the rest of the program, and the M&E system clearly documented. And one thing I would just want to mention here that I don't think I've really emphasized up to now, is that of course, all of these would be happening in collaboration with the program or the project's different stakeholders. So the core objectives, it wouldn't be, let's say, the M&E person sitting in their silo deciding these are the objectives of the M&E system. This would be done in collaboration with the rest of the program team, with the populations that may be affected by the program, with the donor, and possibly with other interested parties. The same with the principles of the M&E system and the other elements. Okay, so I wanted to maybe just kind of close the presentation part with an example, sort of a visual of the typical structure of an M&E system, what it might look like. So here you can see, actually you start at the bottom. The M&E system objectives here, let's say, are to demonstrate accountability, inform decision-making for program management, and support credible storytelling. So the M&E activities are going to go about doing that, following the principles that we see here along the left-hand side of the slide. And the principles of the M&E system are the ones that I mentioned in the course of the presentation. And then we have the program's theory of change, sort of serving as the core from which everything else emanates for the rest of the M&E system. You have the M&E framework, and you can break it down into these three frameworks. Sometimes there's just a single framework, like the results framework, for example. And then those frameworks inform the different monitoring activities, evaluation activities. I call them evaluative judgments, just to be a little bit broader than just evaluation, because there's plenty of times in M&E that we make judgments about progress that's been made, and it's not necessarily in the context of a formal, what we might call evaluation. And then any additional analyses that might be used to inform the M&E activities. All of the data and the evidence that's collected should, of course, be assured in terms of its quality. And then the M&E system would, report. There'd be like the reflection on the findings and on the evidence, and there'd be planning based on the evidence that's been generated. All of which would serve, and this leads back to the M&E system objectives, would serve the purpose of accountability. The M&E plan, which would be much more conceptual in nature, and then the practical M&E activities could be articulated in the M&E manual. Okay, so that's all I have for now. I wanted to stop here and allow there to be a discussion. If there are any thoughts or questions, I will hopefully have some answers maybe. But I also rely on all of you to jump in with your answers. I think we've all had experience doing monitoring and evaluation, and we're all learning from each other. I don't think there's ever been a point at which, or there ever will be a point at which I've stopped learning as an M&E professional. And I learned very much from other M&E professionals, from program teams, from the way in which different donors do things. So let's have a dialogue.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Kandi. So the floor is open for questions, comments, time to share what we know, what we don't know. We're here to learn, as Kandi rightly said. Maybe we can, or as many of you that can, you could share what has worked for you. What's your approach like as well? Because it's always nice to exchange information and experiment with new ways of doing things. Yeah, and personally, I'm someone who likes to try different things and explore and experiment. Yeah, because then you know, okay, maybe what I've been doing all this while, probably there's something that you might not have paid attention to all along, and maybe you try a different approach, and then all of a sudden you have a better understanding with the processes and how you're able to get the results that you want within a shorter time. So let's share, let's dialogue. Please feel free to type your questions in the chat. You can also raise up your hand and I can unmute you, or you can also unmute yourself. Okay, we have a hand. Peter, please, you may speak.
Great. Kandi, thank you so much. I think the quick one for me is separating the M&E plan and the M&E manual. Over time, we have boxed the two together. And sometimes you have the M&E manual that you need two hands to lift in order to in order to use. So thank you so much. I have this rather bizarre question. Do we have different types of M&E systems? Now, I'm asking this question because in the space, you hear of methodologies like outcome mapping, outcome harvesting, utilization-focused evaluations, etc. So I'm just wanting to pick your thoughts. Do you think there are different types of M&E systems? I don't know. Just to pick your thoughts. Thank you, Nova.
Okay, great. Thanks for that question, Peter. And I love what you said about the documents, the M&E plan, M&E manual. I've actually worked on a project where the M&E manual didn't feel like you needed two people to carry, or the M&E plan felt like you needed two people to carry it, because it included not just the conceptual aspects of the M&E system, but also all the practical tools and everything, all of them in a single document. Luckily, and hopefully, we're not printing things up anymore, so it's not sort of physically carrying, but sometimes just opening a document that is very cumbersome and heavy, and trying to navigate in a document that might be an electronic file can make it difficult as well. It could feel like heavy lifting also. And then to your question, Peter, I think my take on that would be, look, as I mentioned, so each M&E system for program and project should have its program and project specific objectives, and it will have its principles. And one of the other elements was that the key questions that the evidence generated by the M&E system, those key questions should be identified and articulated. So I think that's where you would then tailor, so each M&E system would be tailored to the program. And that's where you would know from the nature, let's say, of the question, you would have a hint, maybe you wouldn't know, but you would have a hint of what kind of data collection and analysis is necessary. So whether outcome harvesting might be the right approach in order to answer the specific questions that need to be answered by the M&E system for a specific project. You'll know whether that might be the right approach. Again, guided by the question that might be asked and guided by the overall objectives of the M&E system. In some cases, the type of question might call for, let's say, a randomized controlled trial. And if that's the appropriate approach to answer a specific question, and I want to just say this very important and, because it's not just about the appropriate approach to answer the question, but it's also about whether such an approach is appropriate to the context, to the program, to the way in which it's implemented. There's a whole lot of factors that go beyond sort of just the technical M&E data collection statistical considerations to be made. But if it's found after considering all those aspects that would be the right approach, then that could be used. So in a sense, you're right, Peter, you could say that there are different types of M&E systems, but each program has an M&E system. And then in the details, in these elements that we've covered today, that would tell you sort of where the focus is, what those key nuances are that are tailored for each program. I hope that answers your question, and maybe others have something to add to that as well. Yeah, I'll stop there.
So are there any more questions or any additions to what Kandi has already said? Okay, Gabriel has.
Yes.
Okay.
Can
okay,
I
Gabriel. Yes, please go.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So to piggyback on Kandi, and thank you so much for this presentation, and Peter for your question. What I will add is that M&E systems are context specific, and so it depends on where you are doing it, where in terms of the sector, where in terms of the geographical context, where in terms of the composition, the people. Are you doing it with school children? Are you doing it with adults who are going to education? Are you doing it with women? Are you doing it with indigenous societies? So where you are doing it, the context will influence how the M&E plan or system will look like. And then also the sector, education, health. And so when you look at these development organizations that we have around us, they are all talking about the same thing, but from different perspectives. All right, so something like when you look at the theory of change that we have, or the logic model, depending on who you ask, some will have impact from input, activities, outputs, outcomes, impact. Some people will not have impact there. They will have short-term outcome, short-term impact. And so depending on who is designing it and the perspective the person is coming from, will determine how the system will look like. And so when you look at when you open the link that I shared in the chat box, Michael Quinn-Patton actually collated more than 100 different M&E systems that he talked about in 2 separate videos. This is one of them. There is a second one. I'll look for it and share with Linda. And then we can, it's not long, less than 15 minutes, and so we can educate ourselves in that space. So thank you. It depends. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Gabriel. And exactly, the context matters so much, which is why one of those elements is about making sure that the M&E system is aligned with the context, with the program's context, with the program cycle. That is just, it's critical. I mean, there's just actually no other way in which to do it. And I think just maybe to link to another point that you made, Gabriel, you mentioned that, you know, it'll sometimes what you have in the M&E system will depend on who is doing it and so on. That is true to an extent, but I do think that these elements that I've outlined, I found for me, having those make sure that there's some kind of consistency and make sure that no matter where this M&E system is being applied, it ensures that it'll be fit for purpose. It will be tailored very specifically to that specific context, as we've said. But for example, having a robust theory of change, I'm not sure how helpful it is to have a theory of change that doesn't meet the criteria for being robust. And one thing that you mentioned about the types of theory of change, by the way, that kind of also touches on the difference between a theory of change and a theory of action. And so it's, of course, you can have, like, let's say, a theory of action there instead of a theory of change, if that's something that is what's most appropriate for the program. But I think there's, you know, there sort of has to be certain minimum standards if we want to be sure that the M&E system is going to be fit for purpose.
Great. Okay, so there's a question from Alexander, and the question he's asking is, what's the difference between M&E system and M&E plan?
Okay, great. So Alexander, so the way I see it is sort of the M&E system is this entire, sort of structured, systematic way in which we go about measuring results and reporting on them and all of that. That's the M&E system as a whole. And then the M&E plan, as we talked about, is where we articulate that M&E system, where that M&E framework is basically described. And it's sort of like, what is this M&E system about? What is its objective? What is the context in which it operates? What is the theory of change to which it's attached? What is, what's the plan for collecting evidence? And what are the resources that are being made available in order to allow like the specified M&E activities to actually be operationalized and be implemented. That's how I see the difference. Maybe anyone else can jump in on the difference between M&E system and M&E plan.
Yeah, so the
Gabriel,
way I explain,
yeah.
So this is how I explain the difference between M&E plan and M&E system to folks. So I use the analogy of a building, right? So think of the M&E plan like you want to build a house. What do you need to build that house? You need a plan which will tell how big should the building be? How many rooms do you need? Where should the kitchen be? How many windows do you need? Right. And so when you have this in mind and you put it down as your plan, then that is going to guide the architect on how to put up this building that you are looking for. On a basic level, that is the M&E plan. So what are your questions? What are your objectives? Who are your stakeholders? And all those what, and how questions, right? Now, after you have put up the building, you have your windows fixed, your doors fixed, you have your bed, your kitchen well stocked, and your 80-inch TV in the living room, your air conditioning, everything working perfectly. Then we can say you have a system in place. So you have your monitoring instrument, you have your evaluation plan there, you have your meetings, standing meetings working well. Everyone is doing what is expected of them. You turn in your report on time. There are no delays. There is responsiveness between collaboration, cooperation. I mean, everything is working well. Then we can say you have a system in place. So the M&E system, I believe, will come after you have a plan. So the plan will guide you on how to implement the system. So from my side, this is how I tell the difference between a plan and a system. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Gabriel. I think I'll just add to that. It's a nice metaphor with the sort of an architectural plan and the house itself. I'll just add to that to say that, yes, in the ideal world, maybe you sort of have a plan first and then you put everything in place. But like I mentioned, we don't live in an ideal world. Often there are components of an M&E system happening at some point, and we need to tweak them and tweak those elements and sort of backtrack. And also, even a non-system is a system. So sometimes if it's not working well yet and we need to refine it, it's still a system that we need to then refine, touch up, tweak, fine tune in order to be safe. But overall, I love your analogy. Yeah, the architectural plan in the house. Great.
Yeah, I also like that too. Okay, so we have a couple of submissions in the chat. So one from Kamal, and he said, thanks very much for the articulate presentation, Kandi, and also to Gabriel for the insights. I just want to find out whether the M&E plan is the same as the M&E framework.
Okay, so that's a similar question to the earlier one. So the plan, the plan is where you document everything, or it would be the equivalent of the architectural plans, if you use like sort of Gabriel's analogy. And then the system itself would be, the framework and the system would be then the actual, components of that M&E plan. It's a structured, systematic way in which evidence is being gathered.
Right. Okay.
In my understanding, the framework has some specific components that we can mention that come to mind. First is your evaluation questions. Then, so let's think of it as a matrix. So first you have your evaluation questions in the first column. Second column, you have your indicators. Third column, you have your data sources. Then you can add the frequency, the analysis that you use, and all those things in addition. So if you have that, and then timelines when what will be done, right? So if you have that, we call it the framework. So that's how I think of evaluation framework. We have some specific activities that you put in that box. Some people also call it a crosswalk. So it also depends on who you ask, right? So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so there's a question from Fami, and the question is, are there any tools or help on system change?
Are there any tools or help on system change? Well, that could be a whole another conversation. Again, this is really focused on sort of developing and fine-tuning an M&E framework or M&E systems. There was this one bullet point that I had among the principles of the M&E system, which would be on transformative, in terms of making the M&E system as transformative as possible. And also, it also depends on the nature of the program. Again, this goes back to context. If you're working on a program or a project that's trying to bring about transformative change, and I think in this day and age, I think we all recognize that programs and projects are working in complex systems, and often to bring about a sustainable change, we need to change elements of those systems. Change elements of the actors who influence the outcomes that are working in that environment, and not just focus on, narrowly perhaps on what the program is doing. So there's a lot of information out there and tools out there. I mostly work on adaptive programs. So the idea is to achieve system change. And so there's that component. And then within the M&E system as well, there's a lot of things we can do in order to help support that system change, or to bring about transformation. For example, just sort of interrogating what we consider to be evidence. Often traditionally, evidence is just one kind of evidence, and people's lived experience, for example, has been ignored. And this could be, it's actually a whole nother big, huge topic, and I won't be able to do it justice here. But yes, there are tools and ways in which to go about tracking and also supporting and facilitating transformative change through the M&E system itself, beyond what the program might be doing.
All right, Fami, I hope, okay, she said, Fami, may I call you for further discussion on this later? Okay, so I think she wants to have a follow-up.
You can get in touch. We'll have the tool, the guide that I mentioned earlier on, that Linda will share, or share a link to. Will have my details. So sure, Tammy, you can feel free to be in touch.
Okay.
Super, thanks. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Okay, so Gabriel has a comment. He said, non-system is a system. I like that, Kandi. So he's actually quoting something that you said in your submission. Yeah. Okay. I think we can make room for one more question, maybe one quick one or a comment. Anyone wants to ask a question? One last question? Okay, it looks like everyone is fine at this moment. Okay, so Kandi, just maybe in summary, or just give us some parting words, and then I will share the resources and give some announcements. Thank you.
Okay, great. So thank you again to everyone for having me. So the guide that's been prepared that Linda will share a link to, and it's shown also here on the screen. You can go ahead, it'll have some of these elements that I've touched on, and you can go through it in order to assess your own program or project, see whether your M&E system is fit for purpose. So you can go ahead and do that. And then if you'd like to keep the discussion going, I mentioned that the guide will have my contact details, but you can also get the contact details are also shown here on the screen. So please do feel free to be in touch. I think it's only through dialogue and exchange that we continue to learn and grow in our profession and continue to improve. So please do feel free to engage. Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kandi. It was a pleasure having you. You're so loaded with a lot of information, and I'm sure people here can attest to that. You've really done justice to the topic, and I'm sure after here, people might want to reach out to learn even more. So in the chat, I'll be sharing a number of links. So the first one I've shared is in relation to what Kandi said about the resources available in connection with what we discussed today, looking at developing a monitoring and evaluation system for your program. And in addition to that, she also has some resources, so you can also access her blog where she, writes about M&E and other things in relation to the sector. And then you can also connect with her on LinkedIn. So I'll share her LinkedIn bio in a bit. So that's her LinkedIn bio. And also the link to her consulting firm. Okay, so this space is also about, building networks. So let's network, let's get to know each other better, even beyond these meetups. I will also share a feedback form. So please take some time to provide feedback on how today's session went, what you thought about it. Let us know so we can improve and also incorporate your feedback into future meetups. And then we also have recordings of our previous sessions. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the call, we started these more or less webinars to engage practitioners and also to provide a platform for people to learn about M&E and research and learning and everything that is linked to these areas. Okay, and then I will also share links to Women in RML. So you can follow us on Twitter. I'll share the Twitter link in a bit. Yeah, I know that there are a lot of links in there, but I'll leave them here. So I won't be in a hurry to jump off when we are officially done. But just take your time and, copy what you think will be relevant to you. And yeah, I'm hoping that the next time we have our meetup, which will be in about a month's time, I will see all of you as well. Okay, so I've shared the LinkedIn Women in RML link. So please feel free to follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn for updates on subsequent meetups. Okay, so this is where we draw the curtains for today's meetup. Thank you everyone who has been on this call. Some of you joined earlier than our start time. We really appreciate your punctuality, and yes, hopefully next time we'll have more. So if you can promise me that next time you would bring someone on board as well, so we can all learn together. So huge thanks to our speaker, Kandi. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for availing yourself. And yeah, we hope that you can come on board to speak on another topic. Yeah, so we'll definitely be in touch after here. So huge thanks to Abraham, J. Poku, Akoko, Dr. Benjamin, Ima, Gabriel, Tamal, Maureen, Miss Nomsebo, Patricia, Perpetual, Peter, Rosie, Sammy, and Sayraman. Some people joined early and they dropped off. Huge thanks to everyone who joined. And yeah, I wish everyone the best of the week. Yes, take care, and I'll be on for a while so that you can have the links.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.